Good morning, good morning. How is everyone's day going? Afternoon, evening? Hello, hello. It's 11 a.m. where I am. How about you guys? Where are you guys watching from today? Good, good. Also, in the comments, let me know. I'm going to choose a second palette. So I will be painting two things today. And I'm going to be painting one with my unicorn food, but then I've got a couple palettes here you guys can choose from for the second one. California, Illinois, Sweden. Nice to see everyone. This is one option, Viviva color sheets. I've got Winsor and Newton. I have the Stuart Simple or Culture Hustle palette too, and I have Koi. So let me know which one as the second. Seattle and Finland. Wow, Oregon. So exciting to see everybody from all over. We've got one vote for Viviva. 2 for Viviva. Scotland. Ooh. Koi or Viviva. All right, I think we'll do our second one as Viviva, and I love that because we're going to be painting bright, colorful fruit, and these really pack a punch with color. Koi is your vote. We do have a couple Kois there, but I think Viviva is gonna win out for today. Okay, so you guys did give me some feedback last time, and the suggestions were split between the cityscapes and the fruit. And the fruit won merely because I did attempt to paint some cityscapes and it did not go according to plan. I got a couple comments. It seemed like you guys appreciated seeing my failures. So if you want to see more of those, I can definitely post them because I definitely fail at painting quite often. But the other thing is a few people said, well, if you can't do it, I can't do it. And I just want to say that that it might not be true. I do like cities and I think they're interesting, but it's not something that necessarily holds my interest for very long. And so I think a lot of what you can paint has to do with what you really enjoy. So if you're a big cityscape person, you might actually have a better chance than I did. Your clouds haven't been working. Oh. All right, so today we're going to be doing the most popular requests through hearing on Instagram were for pomegranate. And I just so happen to actually have a couple pomegranates. This one's still, I'm going to eat this one later today. We have a whole one, and then this one came to me and it was already a little bit rotting. So figured I'd just cut it open. It doesn't smell very good, but it still looks kind of neat. So we actually have a live one here. Then I printed off some reference photos from Unsplash, which is my favorite royalty-free image one. So it was pomegranates, kiwis, and pears. So we're going to be painting some different pears and some pomegranates and a couple kiwis. I'm actually going to start off with a larger piece. And just since we're just getting started, for those of you who don't know, and this is your first class, my name is Lacey, and I'm the artist behind Rebel Unicorn Crafts. We do a live class here on most Saturdays. It's 11 a.m. Mountain Time, and I do typically record, or if TikTok records them, I will upload them to YouTube. So if you had to run because your kids are needing your attention or something like that, or you've got to go to work, you can actually catch up afterwards. If you're brand new to my classes, the way they work is I typically paint things a couple times so that you can see. If you can't keep up, that's totally fine. You can kind of pick and choose what you want to paint, but I want to make sure that I can show a couple different times, and I usually paint with 2 different palettes. Today we've selected the Viviva ones, and then these are mine. These are the Unicorn Food palette, just so that you can kind of see how they're working. If you are going to be working with a dried pan palette, I recommend that you take a moment and wet those colors. so that when we are ready to use them, we're going to be able to get them a little bit easier. Now, in general, for most of my classes, we have to do a lot of like pre-mixing of colors, but one of the things I love about fruit is we're going to be doing a lot of mixing on the fly from straight from the palette and right onto the page. Kids need your attention equals your life. Yes, I don't personally have children, but I can understand that a lot of my friends do, and it seems like, you know, they can't sit down for a long period of time. So I want to make sure that everything is accessible to you guys too. All right, so I think what we're going to actually do today is we're going to first, let's talk about some of the shapes and some of the general sketching for these different things. We're going to wait for the pomegranates because they are the most complicated of the three fruits we've selected today. Oh, bananas. We could do some bananas. I do actually have a tutorial on bananas. I don't know if I've posted it yet, though. Let's start with these ones. If we've got time, I will throw in some bananas, too. I kind of compiled the most frequent ones for what people suggested. So let's actually start with kiwis, and let's just talk about some of the shapes. Now, before I get started, if you're brand new to watercolor, I typically sketch with a pencil, and I also sketch a little bit harder because one, I don't really mind the pencil shape showing through my watercolors, and two, I want to make sure you guys can actually see. But I did get a couple of people who said they didn't realize that once you put the pencil down and then you paint on top of it, it effectively seals it in so you can't remove it afterwards. So if you are really sensitive and to pencil marks and you don't really want them to, I don't know if sensitive is the right word, but if you don't prefer being able to see pencil marks, you want to, when you draw something, so let's say we draw a circle, you want to draw really, really light, and then you're going to want to grab something like a kneaded eraser and just lightly kind of pick up that extra graphite until really only you can see it. So you might not even be able to see that in the camera, but I can still see that pretty clearly. So you want to do that, or you can use something like watercolor pencils in order to sketch the colors, and then they will, or sketch the whatever you're doing, and they will kind of blend in as you paint. Yes, absolutely. Come back whenever you want. So let's start with our most basic shape. Most of these, if you can draw, I know that this isn't a sketching channel and I'm not a super great sketcher anymore, but if you can draw a circle, you can draw an oval, and you can draw, you know, some more boxy type shapes, you're going to be totally fine. Maybe even some scribbles. Because that's what we really want to do when we're looking at these different fruits. So let's take a look at some of these shapes. When we see one of these kiwis, it's basically an oval that's a little flattened kind of on the ends. Depending on the direction it is facing, it's going to be more or less stretched out. And then even like these little halves, they're just going to be ovals with a little half moon. So let's actually just kind of take that into consideration, that even if you're not great at sketching, you can sketch something like this pretty easily. Oh, that's very nice. I was actually thinking mine were all dry, but I didn't want to put lotion on before class because then I can get the oil on the paper. So let's just start with a basic kiwi shape. So we want something like an oval. Now, what I'm doing here is this is not necessarily going to be a composition. I might turn it into one, but I just kind of want to explore some of these shapes, and then I'll talk about how to paint them. And then for my second one, I will probably compose something a little bit more composed. So if you're following along, you can feel free to kind of place these in a way if you want this to be a finished composition, but I'm going to kind of just go willy-nilly here. Start with the kiwis, go into those pears, and then finally into the pomegranates down here. So we've already pretty much got our first kiwi type shape. All we really need to do is add on a little bit of texture to kind of show where the end is going to be on one, and for that I'm just going to kind of scribble. We're going to give it like a little messy bun kind of a shape here. So if we wanted to do one that's full here, then if we wanted to do a half one, we're going to need a more round oval, but still a little elongated. maybe a little bit flatter on certain sides, because some of these, notice that these fruits, even though they're round, sometimes they have flatter shapes on them. So if you have some flat spots, it's okay. And then let's just round off that bottom here into a little half moon shape. And that's going to, in essence, be our kiwi. Now, obviously, we're going to need to have some kind of inner area here. Make just kind of a oblong and textured shape. And then we will eventually add in some darker speckles in there to show those little seeds. You're allergic to kiwi. Are you allergic to the whole thing or the skin? Or I'm sorry, I don't actually eat kiwis that often. Let's do one more where it's kind of like this, where we're not actually really seeing much underneath, just in case you're more comfortable. If you're brand new to painting and into sketching, if you're like, oh, gosh, that looks so complicated, stick with simpler things and stick with ones where it's like the vantage point doesn't make you have to get some of that dimension and things in there. You can just stick with, okay, this is just a slice here that I can just see the top. All right, now let's move on to talking about the pear. So I'm going to sketch a bunch of these out first, just so we're a little familiar with the shapes. And then we're going to move on. Now, I've intentionally put this picture here just so that we can kind of see if we wanted to add in a leaf. That's what a pear leaf is going to look like. It's going to kind of be that shape. And you could do whatever pears you want. You could do green pears, yellow pears, or you could do those darker red pears. So you can adjust your colors how you want. I might do maybe a yellow and a green one. And let's start with these general shapes. So taking a look at this, look at that. There's kind of a circle here, and then, oh, it's basically a triangle on the top. And then we just have to kind of make those little corrections in order to actually kind of change the shape. So let's actually start this one with the half one. So again, we're going to make kind of a circle-esque. Does not need to be a perfect circle. Ooh, maybe a little better than that. Let me grab my eraser here. And then let's make that triangle on the top. Kind of like this, but we're going to want to then kind of round here a little bit, and also come up and kind of give it a little butt, I guess. And then we just want a bit of a stem. Then I can go ahead and lightly erase that inner part. I'm going to actually draw a little bit harder. I'm looking at the screen and it looks like you can't see too much what I'm doing here, and I want to make sure you can see what I'm doing. So you could actually leave that here if you wanted that to be the one that's just full, or if you wanted to, pears have kind of this fibrous material that comes kind of down to the center, and then it opens up here, kind of like what you would see on the inside of an apple if you haven't cut a pear in this way, because you don't typically cut a pear like this necessarily. And then you can usually see one of those little seeds, at least one, maybe two. The pencil is, no, this is just a graphite pencil. And we can add in a little more detail. You can also kind of add in this bottom part here, because there's usually that little kind of bit of fluff down there. All right, let's add in another one, and let's go for one of these more short, squat ones. So rather than kind of it being a little taller, the other thing you can do is take a look at kind of in dimension. So this pear here, if we're looking at this one, wide, it's almost 2 times as tall as it is wide, whereas this one here, it's pretty much the same. It's a little bit taller than it is wide, but not by much. A bit of fluff, yes. So we are going to be painting with watercolor today. And I'm specifically going to be using Unicorn Food and Viviva watercolors. So let's make a little more squat type pear. So rather than being more circular, I am going to try to go a little bit more oval for that bottom shape. And then draw that triangle on the top. And then let's kind of round out bring those sides in a little bit before it flares out at the bottom. And we can kind of add in a little texture there at the bottom. Erase this part. And then add that stem in. So we're going to get some of that dimension by the way we actually paint it, but in essence, that's how you're going to draw some different pears. All right, moving on to the big guns. The beautiful pomegranate. These ones are a lot more fresh than the ones that I currently have, so we can kind of see how they can be shiny. The one that I actually have here is obviously a little more textured, a little older. But one thing I want you to notice is that the pomegranate is more of a polygon shape than it is round. And you can actually see this pretty well once these dry out a little bit more. But when we're drawing these from different angles, so if we were drawing it from the top down, it's not necessarily just going to be a circle. Unless you want one of those super duper fresh ones that's super plump, then you'd want to make it a little bit more circular. But if you wanted to have one that's a little more angular, even these ones, you can see that inner structure here. So one of the best ways that personally, I don't remember where I saw this, but the best way that I've found to cut pomegranates is you cut the top off, and then it exposes where these little segments are within it. So then you can lightly score on the outsides, and then you just stick your knife in the middle and kind of twist it, and it will open along those lines, those segment lines. So it's kind of like an orange in a way, where it has those individual segments. But anyway, so the thing with the pomegranate is I feel like you can actually get a lot more directions with pomegranates than something like a pear, because, I don't know, it just has even though you think of it as just kind of like a lump or a circle, it actually has some really interesting shapes to it. So let's say if we were trying to paint this from up above, might want to start with defining where that center part is here. And then come out from the sides, and then round, round, something like that. That's actually going to be kind of the general shape of our pomegranate from that way. If you were to hold it from this angle, it's going to start with kind of that little neck here. It's going to kind of seem straight flat across, but then it's going to taper down before being pretty flat on the sides, and then again tapering at the bottom. And you could even kind of allude to the fact that there are some of those kind of segments in there. Now, where it gets really tricky with a pomegranate is obviously when you open it up, because there are all these little kind of bits within it. So when we're looking at this, when you are painting inside a pomegranate, white space is going to be your friend. So if you struggle with that, this is going to be a really good exercise for you to practice how to keep a lot of that white space. So when we open these up, it's basically going to be this kind of a shape that we just did, where we have that little bit of a neck with that top little doodad. What would you call this part of it? It comes straight out. I'm trying to see if I can put all of this in frame here. Then it's going to round and down. Something like this. Then it has that little butt there where it was attached to the tree. I guess this is like the flower, and this is the where it would be pollinated. The crown, the stem. Yeah, I'm curious. Do you guys know? Because I feel like this is the stem. This is where it was attached to the woody bit of the tree. I don't know. Anyways, but then usually in here, there is this pithy part right in here that we want to maintain that white space. And depending on kind of where you cut it, you're going to have these different areas within here that you want to make sure that you maintain that white space. There's also usually kind of that outer coating, so you want to maintain a little bit around the edges of that white space. And then in here. Then when you actually have those little seeds, in general, they're kind of teardrop shape. Okay, should I risk trying to pop one of these out so we can take a look at one of the actual kernels a little bit closer? I might get things a little messy, but if it would be helpful, I'm willing to try to pop it out. Can I draw darker? Yes, sorry, thank you. Let me make those marks. So this inner pith part, this is going to be white. All along the edges is going to be white. I'm kind of actually marking out where my white spaces are going to be. There's going to be a little white area in here. There will also be some white area in here. And coming up down here, maybe a little bit in here too. I hope that's a little better. The calyx. Oh, thank you. All right, let's try to get this one. I feel like this is the safest one. Oh, goodness. I should have tried to pop this out upstairs in the kitchen. Okay, I'm going to take a paper quilling tool to pop this out. There we go. Okay, I don't know how well you guys are going to be able to see this. This is in general kind of that like teardrop shape, but like the pomegranate where you would kind of imagine it to be a lot rounder, it actually has flat sides. It's kind of faceted, almost like a little stone or a little jewel. So you want to actually take a look at, see if I were, whatever, this is my experimental one, but if I were to try to roll this across, it has those flat spots because I don't know how well you can actually see the little pieces. Let me put it up against some white paper so you can see it a little better. Yeah, exactly. Kind of like a piece of corn. Not popping corn because that is rounder, but like traditional corn kernels because where they all get smushed together, they're actually flat. Okay. So in general, that's the general shape you're going to want to have, but in order to give them dimension, like if we were to draw one of these, it's going to be a little rounded at the top. This is not to scale, but just so you can see, it's going to be a little rounded at the top. Then it's going to actually kind of come down in a segment, and then you might see that other segment over there. And then down here in a different area is where you're then going to see that little kind of little area where it connects in there. Still tastes pretty good. I don't know if this is a great pomegranate, but I ate it. All right. Anyway, so back to this. When you put these in here, you're going to want to put some different shapes. And let's not totally overthink this. Just kind of make some of those little corn kernel type shapes. These don't need to be absolutely perfect. And they also change direction. See how these ones are more facing up, these ones are to the side. They kind of just cluster in there where they can fit. So that's going to be one area that has them. I'm also going to put some here where they're kind of all lined up. You want to kind of butt them together a little bit. Just squeeze them in. Also, the way that we're going to paint this, we're going to be able to emphasize some different things. All right, this part's a bit repetitive. So just fill in some of those areas that we didn't decide were going to be the white spaces with some different kind of little of those kernels. Okay. This exercise, when we do go to paint this, is just going to be in varying red colors and then pushing light and pushing darks. Okay, so let's actually get some watercolor out and let's actually start painting some of these things. So I have, hold on, let me see if I've got my other palette down here. There we go. This one will be a little better because I've got more space. I don't know if any of you guys know this, but if you have a metal one like this and it's got the 3-fold, you can actually remove that inner one by just taking some needle nose pliers and pulling out that pin from there if you struggle with space. And I do struggle with space, especially on these lives and being able to frame everything. So let me see how I'm going to best frame these so that we can see. Now, in general, if you are setting up your watercolors, you want to put everything that's going to be wet on your dominant hand side. This is definitely going to be a do as I say, not as I do thing, because I need to be able to show you guys everything I'm doing. But it is a little dangerous to kind of put it up here and then be working between dipping here, maybe possibly tapping my brush off over here, because you're going to increase your chances of dripping on things. So the paintbrush is a size 12 round brush. There are so many different watercolor brushes, and you're going to find what you like, but I do find, especially for beginners, you really only need a single brush. A size 10 or a size 12 round brush will do almost everything that you could possibly want to do with watercolor, and that way you can kind of keep it a little simple at the beginning. All right, we're going to start with the Kiwi. Let's pick our light source. So let's say, I'm going to say that the light is shining in this direction, because when I was kind of drawing them, I had this oriented towards the top. So all of our shadows are going to be over here on these sides of these fruits, and our highlights are going to kind of be opposing them on the opposite sides. Now, if you've got this palette, you know it doesn't have a black or a brown, so we actually need to mix something up. Let me kind of clean off this area where I mixed up a different purple. It doesn't need to be perfectly clean because I'm going to start with the Kiwi and I'm actually going to make a brown. So I'm going to start grabbing some of this guacamole color. I'm going to put a little more water on here. Then I'm going to go into that candy apple color. And that's actually going to get us pretty close to that kiwi type color, maybe a little more yellow. And you could either get a tester strip or if you've got an extra piece of paper just to kind of test it. So that's actually pretty close to the general kiwi color. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place this over most of this here. Occasionally I'm going to wash my brush and dip into some of that water. This is kind of where I want that highlight to be. So I'm going to kind of reserve that space there. And then I'm going to push this all the way down here. And then on the side that's going to be in shadow, you could add in purple or blue. I've got some blue here, so I don't want that to go to waste, so I'm just going to place that on this side. And with the way that I paint fruit, we're kind of going fast and loose, so if this is one where you don't want to overthink things way too much, because your brain's going to fill in a whole bunch of details. And the kiwi does have a decent amount of texture, so I am going to kind of tap in here to encourage this to dry in kind of an irregular way. I feel like purple would have been a better choice here, but I don't want that to go to waste, so I'm just going to go with it. When I add in my shadows, then I will dip into the original color and kind of soften along those lines. And we can always add in more layers here, the more that we go. But for now, I'm going to leave that just like that. Okay, so anybody who's prone to motion sickness, I am going to move this a little bit closer so that you guys can actually see a little bit more what I'm painting. So if you need to, look away for a moment. All right, now we're down a little bit closer. We're going to do, since we already have this brown color, let's go ahead and put it on this one too and give that one kind of a similar treatment. Just placing in, oh, Moogie really wants to paint with us today, so I got a Moogie hair there. Placing that in there. And I'm going to take that same kind of brown color along the edges. Wash my brush, grab some more of that brown, and let's soften kind of along there. And kiwi are fuzzy, so we don't want this necessarily to dry nice and evenly, unless you're going for like a super graphic style, more like outlines and things like that, then you might want that, but that's not what I'm personally going for, so I'm going to just kind of encourage some of those irregular things to happen. Now, when we take a look at these, we want to prioritize what order we're painting things in. So we've painted this, obviously, and if we want to add another layer, we do want this to dry completely before we can add another layer onto it. Depending on how your first layer went, you might want to, or you might want to leave it. We are going to be painting this nice green color budding right up to this part here. So I am going to want to make sure this is dry before I start putting that green into this one. But this one is nice and dry up here, so I can move on to that one. Now the good news is, for those of you who are using this palette, we don't really need to mix up this color necessarily because this one is perfect for it, this key lime pie color. This is kind of like a yellow-green. We're going to be placing this everywhere but in that center area. So just placing this down. Now there is some variation in how light or dark this is, so occasionally I might put a little more water into my brush. And especially as I get a little bit closer, I'm going to kind of soften that a little bit. Yeah, it does kind of look like a potato. I love potatoes. Also, there are these little streaks inside the kiwi of lighter areas, and we didn't reserve those, but we can actually use backgrounds in order to help, or we can lift, in order to help forces, or we can lift them out. So one way you could get some of those is to literally just take your brush and kind of swipe out and lift out some of that color as that's sitting there if you wanted to add that texture in. You don't necessarily need to because people will understand this is a kiwi, but it can help vary that texture a little bit. You can also do the same thing, kind of, by encouraging a background, so you can take a slightly damp brush and tap, and that will kind of push that pigment to the side, but while this is still a little bit wet. So that'll give you a little more texture there too. All right. How's everyone doing on the kiwi first? So we can, depending on how dry this is still pretty wet. I'm a little hesitant. We could be really careful not to touch it. But I might actually wait to do this. Ooh, or should I keep going on it? All right. Okay, so, what do I want to do? Do I want to do that yet, or do I want to wait? Would you guys prefer if I finish the kiwis off before moving on to the pears, or do you mind if I kind of switch in between the two while we're letting things dry? Hold off, okay. All right, I'm going to move in between then. So the next thing I'm going to do is inside of a pear. It's a lovely kind of off-white type color. So let's actually take advantage of the fact that I've got some remnants of this here, that brown color. Let's add in some more water. And let's swatch real quick just to kind of see what color it is. And that's going to be pretty light. If you wanted to, you could take in, I'm going to grab a little of that banana split color and mix that in. And then also grab a little more water. And let's just give it a quick test. So that'll be nice, and that will dry a lot lighter than what it's showing here. So we don't need to be super duper careful on this one. We just want to kind of fill, this is the inside of that pear. We just want to fill the whole thing. Maybe leaving a little bit of white space on a couple areas to kind of show where some of those inner parts, the inner pith parts are. And we can also come back and remember that our pear has this kind of inner stem that's a little more red or orangey or brown. I'm going to grab some of this candy apple again and a teeny amount of that guacamole or olivey color. While this is still a little bit wet, you want this to be mostly dry. We can come in and kind of place that on the inside here in a few little areas. We don't need to overdo this. We can also add this down here too. Be light and just kind of quickly flip there. You could also add in a bit of shadow behind some of those where the seeds are going to go. We're going to do that in a second layer in a minute. We can also kind of build in a bit of our stem. We will modify that in a little bit too. Okay, so moving back over here, let's take a look at what is dry enough. Yeah, Sunny, you're right. We can add in this bit of a stem area here. So I'm going to start this brown color similar to how we did before. So I'm going to start with that guacamole color. Then a bit of that candy apple color or red color to get a bit of a brown. Oh, I need a little more of that green. And then I actually want this to be a bit darker. And since I used some of that blue in the shadow, let's mix some of that in there just to kind of cool this down, darken it a little bit more. And there, we've got more like a burnt umber type color. And then for this, all we need to do is just kind of squiggle that on. Oh, that's not as dark as I thought that was going to be. I should have tested. Let's grab a little more of that blue. And we can just kind of tap it in. Oh, actually that worked pretty well. Now this one could probably use a second coat, and I might go back and do that. But I would do basically the same thing, just kind of depending on time, because I do want to be able to paint the second thing today too. All right, coming over. For this next pear, do you want me to make this pear a yellow pear, a green pear, or a red pear? While I'm waiting to see what you guys want me to paint it, just so you know, I did upload to my website a full-length video where I actually mixed these colors kind of in real time, so you guys could actually see how I'm mixing some of those colors in case you're struggling with the recipes. Oh no, okay. We're pretty split, it looks like. I think it's between the green and the red. Uh-oh, yellow's making a comeback. I think green is slightly ahead. All right, we're going with some green, I think. Okay, so let's talk about green. And actually, let's just take a look at these. So this green pear, when we look at this, it's a little speckled. Also, it doesn't just have greens on it. There is some yellow right around here. And then there's some of that nice green, and then it also has some highlights. So we could start with something similar to that kiwi type color. Or what we can do is actually take a little of this key lime and mix it into a little bit of that brown color. And then let's go ahead and place this in just a couple areas. So let's place it kind of on the slightly shadowed side into that bit of that recess around the bottom here. Then wash our brush, and then let's just soften all of this out. Make the whole thing wet. And maybe avoid a little bit here so that we have a little highlight, but just soften that here. Let's go back into that. So this was like a yellow-green mixed with a little bit of brown. And then as this is still a little wet, let's kind of just vary the color by just stippling in some of this color here. Let's also grab a little more yellow. I'm going to take this, this is banana split. Yeah, banana split. It's kind of like a yellow ochre, just to make it a little bit more yellow. Let's vary that a little bit in there. Maybe wash your brush. And again, I'm going to take a little bit of both of those greens and mix them a little bit into that brown. We want to kind of bump up that color at the bottom, right along kind of that area where it's going to recess in, because there would be a little more shadow there. Grab some water in your brush and just kind of soften. I'm going to actually put some water here so it'll soften but also kind of bloom there. And then again, we can take a little bit of this blue color and use that as the shadow on the bottoms. I'm also going to put a little more shadow kind of in that one area there because it does kind of go in just a little bit on the side. You can also shadow around where the stem is. That can have a nice effect too. And I'm just kind of, I want there to be texture, so I'm kind of just tapping it in certain areas. I've got a little bit too much here, so I'm going to take a damp brush and just kind of diffuse that. If you need to, you can always lift a little bit of that color out. And I feel like this needs a little more here. And I'm actually going to leave that, oh, maybe not. I'm going to put a little more shadow down here while it's still wet enough to where it'll soften as we kind of sit. Just a little bit more. Let's leave it there. We can always add more, but I kind of like it how it is right now. And then, you know what we can actually do, because this one is pretty much dry enough here. We can take some of this green color here, greenish brown color. Let's just double check what it looks like here. We actually need a little bit more. I'm going to take more of that, put that into there, to this green. Hi, Sarah. It's so nice to see you. And that's going to give us this kind of nice, lovely greenish color. Now I'm just going to lightly hint to the skin. So this is where we want to be able to use the very tip of our brush. And if you've got too much in, you might have trouble getting a really nice fine line. So if you want to tap that off a little bit, that'll help. And I'm just going to kind of place this along the edges, just to kind of hint. I don't need to do it everywhere. And I might put it a little bit more at the bottom because we might be seeing a little bit there. So Sarah was one of my first TikTok friends from like a year ago, and I hadn't seen her on here in a really long time. I'm going to place a little blue just to give it a little shadow there, not too much. Oops. Well, apparently I'm putting more than I meant there. And that's actually going to be fairly close to done on this pear. The last few things we want to do on the pear part are, let's actually take some of that green and let's place a little bit on that stem. Then let's grab some more of that blue and that brown color and just kind of emphasize that stem there. Yes, life is really more complicated nowadays. I'm glad to see you back. Now, depending on how dry your pear is, I feel like mine is actually dry enough to add in the nice dark seeds. They're kind of a blackish brown, and you've probably noticed I do have this color here already mixed up. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be using that color that's in there with a little bit of this brown, but I want to show you how I mixed that color up. And I'll just show you right on this. So all I did was take a bit of this vermilion or marmalade color, and then I mixed it with that blue raspberry color, which is kind of like a phthalo blue. Need a little bit more. And that's going to give you a nice kind of gray, depending on your saturation of the two. It'll be a nice kind of gray, blackish color there. So I don't normally tell what colors before. I let you guys typically vote. And I try to switch it up partially because people, you know, a lot of people have very different sets, and I know a lot of people join from other countries too. So I want to keep these kind of a little vaguer so that people who are joining from places where they can't get what I have or are using something different still feel like they can do it. All right, so I'm placing a little bit of that black in with a little brown just to kind of add in some of those inner seeds. And you don't even necessarily need to completely fill them in. Something like that will work pretty well. Oh, I actually quite like that pear. I feel like that looks quite nice. South Africa. Oh, nice. I don't know if I've ever told this story before, but I will always remember I've got a really good friend from South Africa, and one of the very first times that I hung out with her, she was on, we were sitting on the couch next to each other, and she said, "I'm going to go get my jumper from the boot just now." And I said, I didn't know what any of those things meant, because she did nothing after she said that. And I finally just said, "What?" And she said, "My jacket from my car." And I said, "Well, why didn't you go?" And she said, "Well, now is different than just now, which is different than now. And so anyways. That's my favorite little memory with her, which was one of my very first ones. Okay. Let's revisit, because we're pretty close to being done on the pears, but let's revisit those kiwis again. All right. Oh, good. I'm glad. Also, I love your username, Unicorn Spreading Glitter. All right, so we need to add in, I'm going to add in the greens here. So for those of you who didn't see the very first one, for this green, I'm just going to dip straight into that key lime pie. Place it around the edges. Maybe a little bit more. Then I'm going to wash my brush so that I can kind of soften it towards the inside, avoiding putting any paint in that little inner circle that I've put there. And then if you want to add in some of those textures, we can lift out. I feel like this actually needs a little bit more color. Maybe even if you wanted to go a little bit more, I'm going to grab some of that tropical punch and put that into that key lime if you wanted it to be a slightly different green. we can soften that in. Hold on, I got a couple things I've missed here. Ecuador here just started with aquarelle. Nice. Yeah, exactly. It was like a foreign language, even though she was speaking English to me. It was fun. Sri Lanka too. Okay, so I lived in Australia for a while too, and I thought, because some of the people I hung out with really like to pull my leg on things, and so I thought they were playing a joke on me when I first got there, and they kept saying aluminium, and I finally had to I had to look it up. But yeah, I thought they were just messing with me. Oh, hello to Saudi Arabia too. Wow. We have quite the international crew today. That's so exciting. Anyways, do you guys want me to do, I kind of like how this looks, but it is lacking a little bit in saturation. I used too light of a color. Do you want to see me bump that color up, or do you want me to leave this one as it is? I feel like this is officially my most internationally joined one. Bump it up. All right, let's bump it. All right, so let's mix up another brown. Now, browns are great if you just have a bunch of random colors in here. So I'm just going to kind of steal this one, and this is my base. You can see it's a little bit more green than anything else, which means I want to grab its complementary color. So something like a red, in order to bring it more neutral again. Just like that. I personally leave pencil marks, yes. And we could add in a little bit of some darker colors, like some of this purple. I need to re-wet my colors. They are thirsty. We can add in a little bit of blue, which will make it a little darker. And then those kiwis are a little bit more golden, so I'm going to kind of brighten it back up by grabbing some yellows and a little bit of that orange color here. All right, so we're going to basically do the same thing. So we're going to place this down, we're going to leave some space, and then kind of wet in between. We're also going to put the shadow down here. So. And you don't need to be afraid to, if you're like, oh, I just feel like there should be a little yellow here, dip into some yellow and place it there. Give it some variation. I'm going to place all that down. I'm going to wash my brush, and let's soften where I left that area here. And then let's add our shadows. Softening where I've added the shadows, maybe going back in with some more shadowing here. And maybe a little bit more of that original color. Now I'm getting some different separation here, so I'm going to just encourage this to be a little more textured, because kiwis are fuzzy, so they're not smooth. So I am a self-taught artist, kind of. I say kind of because, like, in college and things like that, anytime I had a chance to use an elective as an art class, I did. But I studied business, so I didn't necessarily have that much of an opportunity to do that. I do think that's looking a little better. It looks... You know what's funny is I'm looking at, I can see it on camera and it looks real weird, but in person this actually looks a little bit better than it did. Let's try to make it more camera friendly. Oh, I'm so glad that you're here. How about a little red? Sure. Let's try to put some of that red in there. Maybe let's put some purple in towards the bottom. Yeah, I feel like, so Here is a really good lesson. I should have just let it sit and I should have just added in more later, but I've continued to mess with it and now I feel like I am more ruining it. I'm overworking this area more than anything. So here's a little lesson. Stop while you're not so far behind, because now I feel like I'm really having to kind of catch up and the watercolor is working against me. Okay, I'm gonna leave it like that. Let's also go back in over here, and first let's put a little bit of this brown into our brush, and similar to what we did on that pear, let's just kind of hint to the fact that there is some kind of skin around the edges, just a little bit. Yeah, it is so hard to wait sometimes. Again, I'm going to take that black color, and this is another good time we're going to be using just the tip of our brush, so if you need to, go ahead and kind of tap it off. Now, one really interesting thing when I started to really look at kiwis is you kind of think of them as being super even, but notice that some of them are a little bit higher. Sometimes they're actually stacked too high with the little seeds. And so you don't need to make super even strokes. You can make a couple, but we just kind of want to come around this center part with some different concentrations, lengths, and little kind of taps. Just like that. So that color was a mixture of the blue raspberry with the marmalade, which is how I make my black. So it's kind of like a phthalo blue plus a orange. Yeah, if you're following from anywhere else and you're either working with a different palette than us, this is going to be a great exercise in picking like colors. I'm also going to really water down my brush, and I'm going to grab a teeny amount of this brown just to kind of give this a little color in here because it's feeling a little bit dull. And then I'm going to soften in. You don't have to do this part if you don't want to, but it just seemed a little dull to me, so I'm going to add in a little bit more. What do I recommend for a beginner? That really depends on what you're drawn to. Whichever one you feel like that seems the most exciting to me, that's probably the best one for you. Because something holding your interest is really going to be the key. I do think that watercolor is a little more process-based, so if you're more of a process person, this is a good one to start with, just because if you like more process type things, there is a lot more variation in the other mediums, I personally find. All right, I'm going to bump up the contrast on this one too, just like what we did. So same thing, just putting a little more of that brown on. And then let's do that same thing where I kind of dipped into some yellow too, just to vary that color. And then some of that dark color here. I hold your interest. That's so nice. That's really nice. So yeah, I do sell this palette, but I do use other palettes too, partially just because I love like almost every watercolor supply. They're so fun. I am partial to this one. Obviously, I'm biased, but I do always also try to use other palettes too, because I know not everybody can get this because I don't ship internationally. I keep looking into it, but man, it's a hassle. And yeah, my little business is like that, you know, the Full House TikTok where small businesses are like, everywhere you look, and then just everybody that pops in is just you. So yeah, I'm shipping, I'm customer stuff. I do everything. So I'm trying. I really want to be able to, but right now I'm a little stunted, so. Oh, I'm so glad that you appreciate them. I love doing these. I have heard of Van Gogh watercolors, but don't think I've ever tried them. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing, same treatment to this one, where I'm just going to kind of tap that. And I feel like it's been a while since I've said this also. I obviously really appreciate when you do purchase my stuff, but I do not want you to feel like you have to in order to participate in our little art community here. So yeah, depending on your budget stuff or just what you have or what you like, you are totally welcome here either way. There we go. You love the raspberry. Oh, I love that raspberry buttercream one too. Okay, let's switch back over to these pears. Let's do our finishing little touches on these two here. One, once this dried, watercolor dries lighter than when you put it down. I'm going to emphasize a few little areas on these just to bring a little more dimension. It probably doesn't absolutely need this, but I'm doing it. So there we go. And then I need to add the little stem on this dude here too. Oh my goodness, I think I'm getting pomegranate juice everywhere. Okay, so I'm going to take some of that brown here. I'm going to take some of that blue and put it here. Oh, I see Steamboat Studios says you can relate. So Steamboat Studios does some really cool kind of STEM arty type things. If you're curious about some of the science behind some different things, check her out. Buying art supplies is a separate hobby from using them. I absolutely agree. Classes start 11 a.m. Mountain Time every Saturday. Well, most Saturdays, at least. Favorite colors on watercolor depend. It's typically like a phthalo blue is usually my favorite within a set. Okay. So it is finally time to move on to the pomegranate. And I am going to, let's see, what do I want to do? We need to mix up a nice kind of dark red color here. So the reds in here, they might all look fairly similar because there's kind of like a vermilion, which is like an orangey red, then this is more middle red, and then this starts to get more pink. But there isn't like a deep, dark red because pomegranates are a deep, dark red. So what we want to do is make kind of a Bordeaux or a burgundy color. Let's start with putting a little water in here. Then I'm going to grab some of that candy apple color. Mix that in. I've got a little tester strip so we can kind of just see what our color looks like. And then you've got a couple options here. You could add in some purple or any of these other ones here. I personally am biased in that, yeah, I mentioned I like the phthalo blue, so I'm going to add in some phthalo blue. Yes, I have been, the last couple I've been able to upload to YouTube, so that's actually already a pretty nice kind of pomegranate type color. Maybe a little bit more just saturation, so I'm going to go in between these two. Some of that candy apple. And then some more of that phthalo blue. Oh yeah, that'll be a nice kind of base color, and then I'll be able to dip directly into that bright red color. So again, let's take a look at our pomegranate. We're going to have shadows here, highlights here, shadows here. Okay, so there's a question on what paper do I recommend. So I did upload a video yesterday to my YouTube where I tested 9 different papers and surfaces, and I kind of discussed, I also put this as a blog post on my website, the benefits. There are different ones depending on what you like. If you like to layer, I have a different opinion on that versus if you like blooms and things like that. So, all right, so what we want to do is, the way I'm going to start this pomegranate, I mentioned earlier that there's going to be a bit of shadow here. There'll be darker here and down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this nice, beautiful color I just mixed up, start by placing it in some of those areas. Then let's wash our brush, take the wet brush, and just kind of pull that in a couple of these areas. We want there to be variation. We're working a little fast and loose here. Need a little more water on my brush. Just like this. We can add in some more of that color. And I also want to start varying the color. So I'm going to pop in just some of that straight red color in a couple areas. Now I'm going to encourage the white or the highlight here by dropping in some fresh water. That will kind of bloom in a minute. Some more of that burgundy color, more of that bright red. All right, I went out of the lines a little bit, so I got to kind of compensate there. I'm also going to just kind of hint to the fact that it's little... Oh my goodness, somebody said what it was. I don't remember what they said though. I'm also going to highlight, because remember it kind of is in those segments, so I'm going to kind of lift out in a couple areas just to kind of hint that maybe there are some flat parts. And I'm also going to take some of that blue and let's shadow. Was it the calyx? Yeah. Shadow, shadow, shadow here. I need a little bit more up here. All right, I like where it's at so far, so I'm going to not do the kiwi, and I'm just going to step away for a minute. Okay, let's add in, while we've got this color mixed up, let's do the same thing to this one here. So this one's going to be a little more unique. We need to shadow around the edges in general more, but we're going to then put our real shadows more on this side and right kind of under here. Because if I were to hold it like this, I feel like my light is kind of coming from this direction, so we can see that. It's lighter here. It's a little darker where that shadows, and it's really dark here. Okay, so I am going to start by kind of outlining most of this. You could go around the whole thing, or if you want, you can kind of work in little segments, so I can then lighten that with just some water, dirty water, I guess. Then go between, maybe work in segments. If you're having trouble with things drying at different times, you're like, I am struggling with that today, working in segments can be super helpful. Go back and forth. And again, I'm going to dip straight into that red in a couple areas. Let's let that bleed together. I'm avoiding that middle part. I want variation in this. But now I want to start bumping up. I want it to be darker on this side, so I'm going to put my little shadow in there. Some more of that red here. And then let's start adding in some of that blue to really shadow kind of the outside edge. All right, I'm running out of some of that blue, so I'm just going to dip into a little bit of that, both that blue raspberry, which is kind of like a phthalo blue, and that blueberry muffin, which is a little darker. Let's put just a little bit in there. And there we go. I think that'll work there. So color bleeding is going to vary on a couple factors. It could be the way you're placing it down, or it could be the colors you're using, or it can also be the paper. It's going to interact a little differently depending on the paper you're using. I'm painting on Canson XL today. The other thing is to just kind of pay attention to how it's bleeding and use what the watercolor is giving you. So if yours is not quite how you want it to be and things are bleeding in a different way, go with it. Just kind of lean into it. Try to push the boundaries of it. Okay, I'm going to grab some of this again, and I'm going to do this on the outside here. We just want to kind of hint to some of that color. So occasionally I'm going to put a little more of that red in. I feel like watercolor is kind of like yes-anding things, you know? Put that little nub in there. And then let's actually just add some straight green onto that so that it makes that more that stem color at the bottom. Now remember, this area is going to be white space we're going to reserve. But if we look at this, we also want to put some kind of little brown floofs in there. This is where, like, I think this is the, are these the stamen? Where it has all the pollen and things in there. Okay. Okay, so when we go in to fill in some of these, I am going to wait to add in some of those fluff until that part dries a little bit more. But when we want to add in some of these, we want to be intentionally a little willy-nilly. So we're going to go between putting some of this color in, adding some red, adding some blue, dropping some water in. And let's just kind of start filling in some of these. So let's do a couple of these. Just kind of place that around the edges. Maybe grab a little bit straight into that red. Then let's kind of wash our brush off so it's wet. And let's just kind of plop that in there. Oh, there we go. Then maybe add in a little bit of that darker color there. So the brush I'm using today is one that I sell. It is a size 12 synthetic bristle round brush, and I do sell them, but if you can find something similar, as long as it's got a nice tip on it, that's what's going to really be your friend there. So placing in some different colors, constantly kind of trying to shadow along each side so that it really kind of pushes it back. Watercolors are like jazz. So I will say, depending on where you're at in your watercolor journey, I mean, everybody's going to be different, but my personal experience with watercolors was I started off way too loose. I started way too loose. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no control. Then I started to really understand it, which then made me be a little more precise. And I kind of feel like I'm finally rounding a corner where I'm able to get that looseness back in. So it's like you almost have to like rein it in, and then you have to let it go again. Well, you're joining at the perfect time to learn how to paint the inside of a pomegranate at least. Okay, so, also, I need to look at the time. Let me double check something. I don't think I'm going to be able to paint that second one. I'm sorry. I knew I should have. I was going to do just 2 fruits, but then I decided to do 3. Whoops. All right. So Let's go back to this. When I'm painting some of these in here, I am also intentionally painting ones that aren't touching to start with because I want to be able to have some separation between them. I don't want all of these to bleed together. So I'm going to kind of go in, I'm going to work in layers where I'm going to paint some of these ones that don't touch. And I start by putting in kind of that maroon color. I will pop in some bright red. I will outline it I'll put a little blue there to give it a little more dimension. And then I'll pop some water in to get that background that's going to create that highlight. But I'm going to go through here and do a bunch of ones that don't touch. So maroon, grab a little red, grab a little bit of this blue right along, and I can either leave that, and then I'm going to drop in some water there. The 20-10-5 exercise was awesome for getting you to loosen up. Yeah, isn't that fun? We might do that one again soon. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you guys want me to pick another subject where we do that 20-10-5 one in a couple weeks? I had a ton of fun doing that one. And actually, I had a bunch of people send me pictures. So that makes me really apt to want to do it again because I love getting the pictures. The engineer in you wants everything precise. Yes. So actually, a lot of what I do in my business is I do group classes for like it's a lot of times it's like tech companies. They do like team building things. And so I've taught a lot of engineers how to paint, and we have to pick the subject carefully because it's got to be really process oriented type thing. But I like to call it that and fluid painting. I like to call perfectionist exposure therapy because you have to just kind of go with it. It was too stressful for you? Oh no. Well, I don't want it to be stressful, but it is, the first few times you do an exercise like that, it can be stressful, but then once you do it a couple times, it starts to feel more natural. And also like you you have to go into it being like, none of these were probably going to work out, and I'm just going to practice. Not really the point of watercolor unless you can absolutely use tiny brushes and things like that. But that is part of the reason why I like to use the one brush, because it does give me some limitations on certain things that then forces me to take advantage of different things. All right, so I'm doing the same thing all throughout. And this is, I'm now remembering why I was a little hesitant to try to teach this on live, because a lot of this is just repetitive. But you can already kind of start to see how some of these are starting to kind of come together. And all I'm trying to do is just force some different colors in that little area. You could go in and just kind of plop those colors in there. You'll probably get a really nice result too, but I don't know, I like it like this personally. This is my little bit of I'm not much of a perfectionist, but this is kind of the perfectionist part of this. Yeah, I am quite biased. Like, I love this brush. That was, I wanted to have some really bright and vibrant colors too. But I do have to say that the brush is my favorite thing that I've ever had made, because I always really liked like a size 10 or 12 round brush, and some of them the points are just very mediocre or the quality isn't very good, so sometimes you buy it and it's great and other times it's not. And so yeah, this is my favorite thing I've ever had made. You drew way too many seeds. Yeah, maybe maybe go a little bigger or add in more white space. So if at this point you're like, oh, I'm never going to finish this, just, maybe erase a couple of them. That needs to be white space. All right, I got to look through some of these. I'm losing a few comments. You even painted the entire fruit as a block. That's okay. So there's a question on how long. So this one I have been using. You can see this one I have, the main thing that it has for wear and tear is you can't see the number on it. I have used this enough. I think I've been using this one since September. And as you guys know, I paint quite a lot because I make all these different little videos. I come on here and then I also just personally paint. So this one has lasted me, an unquantifiable number of paintings. I did grab a new one that I might start using soon, but the tip still works. But I don't know. I have a second one that occasionally I will pull out, but I actually don't know where it is. So yeah, this is also that one where I technically ruined the tip by I let it dry where it was pushed up against something like this. And this is that one that I just dipped in hot water. Yeah, I do this on most Saturdays. You're welcome to join. If you've got some kiddos that like to do art, this is also a good time to, hand them their little set and let them paint. I also like to see what the kids paint too, because sometimes they'll completely take it in a different direction. I love that. I love how much, when I used to teach classes in person, how uninhibited kids were with art. We grow up and we really think we have to do everything perfect. Yeah, watercolors are so different. You attempted a cityscape? Oh, that's exciting. So how am I deciding shading on these? I'm not really. If we look at this here, notice that just because it doesn't need to necessarily be by the way the light is hitting it, because it's also going to depend on how it got cut, what direction it's kind of facing. So you can really you just want to put some shadow on one side of the seed in essence. Because notice how some of them, there's like shadow here, there's actually shadow here. This one, there's more shadow here, there's shadow along this side. It kind of goes wherever it wants. All we really want to do on this is just make sure that we are having varying contrast. So some we want lighter, some we want darker. I have run out of my one color and I'm going to go back in and start on some of these that we're already kind of touching over here but are dry enough now to move on. So I need to remix this color. And let's make this one a little different. So I'm actually going to use some of that blueberry muffin instead of the blue raspberry. So the color will be just a little different. And let's just go ahead and place some of this in here. You could also kind of double duty some of these. We're going to try to kick this into overdrive because we're definitely coming towards the end of... Oops. I lost track of where I was going there. Coming towards the end of our class. Sorry, I meant to do this with some Viviva too. And grabbing some of this blue color to shadow where things are kind of butting up against each other. You're a 76-year-old kid. I love that. I don't know if I will ever fully grow up, and I am okay with that. So you can kind of see what I'm trying to do here, in essence, is when I butt these up towards each other, I want there to be separation and I want there to be shadow in between the different little segments. That's what's really going to kind of sell this. As kind of the different little layers within there. Now, you could probably just kind of paint this all one color, drop in some other colors, and then add in some shadows later, depending on how you like to kind of paint, if you're impatient with this. All right, so I'm trying to figure out, I'm probably not going to have time to finish all of these little seeds off, so let's revisit a couple things here to finish off the rest of this, because as you can see, this part is where it gets real tedious. It does have a really good payoff. You can actually really get some really good dimension on these if you do go through this, but this part's a little tedious. So let's actually revisit kind of up here and let's add in some of those little fluffy bits. Your palms ended up neon. Oh, I bet that's beautiful. All right, so I'm going to start with, I'm going to take some of that watermelon sugar color. I'm going to grab some of this key lime pie. That's going to give me a pretty nice brown base color here. Let's grab a little bit of that blue just to darken it a little bit. And then we want to add in just some of those little squiggles in here. And the other thing we want to do, you could do this, actually this probably would have been a better idea to do a wash similar to the color of the inside of the pear before we started on all these little guys here, but I didn't do that. But we actually do want to do kind of a wash because the insides of these have a little bit of kind of a yellow tint to them and then some variation. So let's try to get a little bit of that yellow going in there. So let's lighten this part up. I'm going to grab some water. I'm going to put a little more yellow into this. Let's test what that color looks like. It needs to be a little more kind of orangey, so I'm going to grab some of that red and a little more yellow, and then it needs to be really lightened. I know, I'm sorry. And then let's lighten it up a little bit more. That's close to that color, but I want it to be lighter. And then I'm just going to kind of drop this in. I am going to be pretty careful to make sure I'm not actually touching any of those still wet ones. I might accidentally touch a few of them. But we want to just kind of place some of that in here a little willy-nilly. Like this. And let's also get some of that darker one because they have, again, there's texture because sometimes you can see through, and they have the little divots where they sat. And then once I actually fill all that in, it's going to look so good. But unfortunately, I am almost out of battery, and also I'm out of time today, so I'm sorry I can't finish this off. For these ones here, let's add in a little bit of these kind of palm frondy type looks in here too. I want to finish a couple things for you guys. We want this to be darker here. And then we also want to kind of emphasize that rim there so that we actually get a bit of what that looks like. We could put in a little more kind of blues in there to add in that shadow. Like that. Yeah, I can post, I don't know if I'll do a TikTok video, but I've been posting some stuff. I'm trying to get back into the habit of putting some stuff on Insta. I can definitely post a picture there. And yeah, I hope that this was at least mildly helpful. I might make a longer form YouTube video on pomegranates if that would be helpful to you guys. I don't know if I can really fit the knowledge of that into a TikTok video. I don't know, maybe I can. No, I don't mind at all if you take a screenshot. Go for it. If anybody needs time to do that, go for it. All right. Well, I really appreciate everybody for spending some time with me today. And sorry I didn't do as much as I thought I was going to. That went slower than I thought. So, does anybody have any requests for next week other than cityscapes? Yeah, I hope everybody has a really good weekend. Thank you so much. I can move this around too if anybody needs more. Oh, ocean, a unicorn. Oh, goodness. Circle of trees looking up at the sky. Ooh, I bet that's a fun layering thing. All right, we're getting a lot of ocean there. I can do some pretty simple ocean things. I can also, I'll do a little research and see if I'm capable of doing more advanced. But the circle of trees thing, I have a feeling I can picture that, and I bet that would be pretty cool. I am practicing flowers. I struggle with flowers, but I'm practicing them because at some point I'm going to teach you guys how to paint them. Rocks. Oh yeah, I could do another. We haven't done the crystals in a while. Gosh, I love crystals. All right, I'm going to take these. It looks like the main ones that I saw were some sort of ocean, circle of trees and sky. And now a few people are kind of liking the crystals. So I will take all of those into consideration and I will choose one or possibly poll you guys depending on my mood. And I will hopefully see you guys all next week on Saturday, 11 a.m. I hope you have a great time this weekend doing whatever you're doing, and I'll see you next time.